Just as a last comment, I just want to emphasize two questions that emerged from this essay on grief. Two aspects in which his account is questionable. The first is the requirement that we have a motivating, strong, substantive desire that the person not have died in order to be said to be truly grieving for the person. And the second has to do with what our object can be when we grieve. The second question is about what we can grieve over. He ends his essay by saying, finally, unlike sorrow and regret, grief is directed to the loss of the lives of persons primarily and other living creatures secondarily. And I think that's probably true and kind of does leave it open. I believe that he is leaving open there the idea that we can grieve in a secondary sense for animals. And I suppose that for most of us, that would mean our pets. Can a person grieve over a lost pet? Well, kind of, I guess, he's sort of suggesting it's possible. And I think, that is a judgment call that each of us has to make. Have you ever actually, do you think that you have gone through something like grief, as he's described it, with regard to a non-human creature, a non-person, if we want to make that claim that only humans can be persons? I don't know. That's something that you would have to decide. I am comfortable with what he says right there, just personally. That is, that grief is directed to the loss of the lives of persons primarily and other living creatures secondarily. I cannot say that I've ever grieved for a pet, for a non-human animal. I can say I've grieved, I think, for a human being. And I guess I'm traditional in that respect. In what he says next is that the strength of this emotion is difficult to explain if the loss, which is its cause and object, is not of something irreplaceable, unique, and, in short, person-like. No other qualitatively indistinguishable individual can replace someone lost to death and grieved. This goes along with the whole theory of persons, of kind of a deep historical theory of persons, selves, that persons are unique and irreplaceable. It may be that pets, pets are too. You may say that. And you may be right. But the sort of standard traditional mainstream idea is that no non-human animal that we know of could be a person insofar as they could somehow instantiate all the qualities that we associate with persons, especially their irreplaceability, their uniqueness. But again, that's a contentious issue. Like I said, I'm comfortable with what he says there, but you may not be, and you may have very good reasons not to be. So that's an interesting aspect of it. It would also go to other things that we may be said to grieve over, other losses that we may be said to grieve over, like the losses of a relationship, the ending of a relationship, a marriage or a deep relationship, a friendship or a romantic relationship, the loss of something important like a career, a job. Can we grieve over those things? Well, again, that's a judgment call. I suppose one of the questions there is replaceability. One of the things about Landsberg's treatment of persons is that it's very strong on the idea that each person is unique and irreplaceable. And the permanence of the depth of the loss has to do with that, the depth of the depth of the person. We can lose a job, we can get another job. Now, whether that other job would be a real replacement for the one we lost I don't know. If a relationship ends, we can form another relationship. There, I don't know. I mean, it would seem that our relationships are unique and irreplaceable. And even if we get other relationships that follow after the loss of one, I'm not sure that I would say that they're replacement relationships. So I would say that there's a real possibility that the ending of a marriage or the ending of a deep, long-standing friendship, that could cause us to grieve if we really thought that it was impossible to repair that relationship, which, practically speaking, in some cases, of course, it is. And one of the difficulties of the ending of a romantic relationship sometimes can be really admitting to yourself that there is just no way that this thing is going to get back, that you're going to get this thing back, moving on, as we say. So that's an interesting, I think, an interesting aspect of it. The other really questionable part of it, interesting part, is this distinction between a wish and a desire, and especially the requirement in the definition G that we actually have a desire that someone still be alive in order to be said to grieve for them. If you've gone through the deaths of, say, a person who's been ill for a long time, you know that that's really not so simple. That someone who has been ill for a long time, especially someone who has experienced kind of diminishment of their capacities. Let's say someone in old age who has lost a lot of cognitive capacities, or someone who's been in a lot of pain, that the death of a loved one can be a profoundly ambivalent experience insofar as there is a certain possibility of a sense of relief at the death of the person, mixed in with, of course, the sadness and perhaps even the desire that they still be alive. Some people, I think, who I've talked to about this essay have said that you don't have to have a desire that the person still be alive to grieve for them, because you know what kind of condition they were in before they died, and you wouldn't want to restore them to that condition. I think that that's an important objection to what he's said, which would not necessarily invalidate his definition of grief, but would require us to adjust it in some ways to say that the situation is more complex, and that perhaps there are instances of grief that don't quite fit his definition. But that would be really for you to decide.